Welcome to the Sales Leadership Lab, the podcast where we stop romanticizing about sales leadership and talk about what actually moves the needle. Whether you are a chief executive officer or chief revenue officer, or anyone who's navigating through the complexities of modern selling, you're at the right place. I'm your host, Dipti Pandit, and I'm very excited about our second episode because I've got an amazing guest right next to me. Born in Tasmania and having worked across Australia and Canada, Amanda has spent over 2 decades inside businesses of every shape and size, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or it's a founder-led business. She has worked across many environments. As an operations leader and general manager, she's seen what works. She's seen what doesn't. And she knows that most businesses don't have a strategy problem, but they have an execution problem. Today, Amanda partners with founders and leadership teams to bring strategy to life at the intersection of people, structure, and commercial reality, with clarity, discipline, and zero fluff. Direct, practical, human. As she puts it herself, when you work with Amanda, there is no BS. Just honest, transparent solutions. Welcome to my podcast, Amanda. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Dipti. Great to be here.
So for my listeners, I'd love to share my experience, how I met Amanda through our networking, as well as through a great opportunity which Amanda offered last year, where Amanda had a workshop for business owners and founders, where we went through a process of how do I derive a strategy for my business. And oh my God, those 3-hour sessions were just mind-boggling. I cannot thank you enough of how wonderful time I spent in actually having a straight focus plan on designing my own strategy. So from then on, it's been on my mind to have you as my guest, and I'm so excited.
Yeah, great, wonderful. I'm glad you got a lot out of it because it's really important to make that time, and it's hard to make that time to focus on strategy.
So Amanda, in my introduction, as I mentioned, as a founder of Focus Solutions, but before that, you've worked across Canada, Australia, and you've worked across diverse companies, Fortune 500, onto founder-led. But what is it that really triggered or inspired you to start Focus Solutions?
Yeah, I think it's something that evolved over time during my career. So when I was coming up through the ranks, I used to be quite frustrated about that disconnect of not understanding why the C-suite may be making a decision, how it impacted me, did it impact me, did I care, did I not care, what were we working towards? Because we spend so much time of our lives at work. And yes, people fill their cups in other ways, which is great, through, badminton like yourself, which is awesome. But we do spend a lot of time at work. So I believe that everyone in a business should understand the purpose of the overall strategy and how what they do contributes to the overall organisational goals. And so that's really why I got into leadership. And then over time, I really enjoy working with a varied client group. So I do enjoy large businesses, enterprise down to family-run, pharmacies.
Yeah.
And that's how Focus Solutions was born, because I saw this problem repetitively and not intentionally, but the disconnect between strategy and execution, and how that was showing up in the day-to-day consistently over businesses of all shapes and sizes. And that's why I decided in 2022 to start Focus Solutions.
Amazing. Now, I have this hot burning question, and I'm just waiting for you to probably finish yours before I jump into it. So the first important question, which I really want to ask you. Now, having been in sales leadership roles myself across various companies, and having had responsibility of designing my go-to-market strategy and sales strategy, What do you think? What would you like to share with sales leaders today that can help them design a good go-to-market strategy or sales strategy? Mostly that aligns with businesses. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you touched on this in episode 1, that you're not necessarily always taught management skills. You're a high performer, and so you're promoted. And when you get into sales leadership, I think maybe you've been really amazing at hitting those revenue goals.
Oh, you've just nailed it.
But revenue is not the strategy, it's an outcome of the strategy.
True.
And like sales training, strategy execution training isn't something that is typically provided within organizations. And so when you get to that level, it's like, okay, so if revenue is not the strategy, there could be other broader company objectives about expansion in the market, different regions. Maybe customer retention is really important for that year and not customer acquisition. So there's all these moving parts. And I think that really comes down to alignment and understanding from the C-suite what their goals are and why are those choices being made, and what does success look like is really important. Often you touched on diagnosing a customer, right?
Oh,
and
yeah,
the
like a
GP,
sales doctor.
Like a sales doctor. And that's very outward, right?
Yeah.
But I think that same approach can be applied to the customer discovery. You've got to do that internally. And so if that's not happening from the leadership team or the executive team, then you can ask those same curious questions to get that alignment and understanding of why the outcomes they're looking for are needed and how that impacts your sales strategy overall. So I think without that, unintentionally silos are created. You can have the CRO, CTO, COO, they're thinking, yeah, we're aligned, we've got the goals, but unintentionally as they get trickled down, that even if you have a flat organisation, and you think you have a flat decision-making process, those walls are, invisibly going up again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No,
I think understanding the strategy beyond the sales revenue target is step 1, and then understanding the other department's goals and how that links back to the company objectives and the why.
I think that leads to the importance of, having those cross-functional conversations and communications and making sure that you're not just in your sales. Because typically, in our sales world, we are probably in silos, though we don't agree to it as salespeople. When I say we, I mean sales. Community. Mm-hmm. We are always very much focused outwards, like you said. It's the customer. We've got to achieve our targets. We've got to achieve our goals. And that cross-alignment that, I really got to see what other businesses are doing, that sort of, reducing that friction and having that open ear to how other people in the businesses are working, how they're doing things. So some really incredible points there, Amanda.
Yeah, and sales are uniquely positioned sitting at the intersection of sales and strategy, and they see the customer journey often at the beginning and at the end as well.
Yes.
So they're actually uniquely placed to start creating some of those cross-departmental, cross-functional conversations. But I think we also know there's years in history of the tension between sales and operations, finance and operations, product and sales and marketing. And that often comes from their own interpretation of the strategy, and coming back to not understanding, the overarching goal being aligned there. But I think when leaders understand the business as a whole, then they become amplifiers of the strategy, not just executors of their piece of it. So speaking of the customer journey, that's a good way to bring in that cross-functional conversation, because people are often only focused on their little piece of intersection of it. So, finance are at the billing and they're concerned about when things are going to come in, and sales are like, we've got to close it because we've got the revenue target, and delivery and product are like, ooh, is the product breaking? Is it working? Are we, client resolution times for, customer inquiries, things like that, how we're servicing them over time. So are people just focused on their own KPIs and their own, versus...
Meeting their own individual targets.
Meeting their own individual.
Own pain points.
Yeah, exactly. And these are things, again, that aren't necessarily in training, right? And you touched before on AI and how that's, and we could talk about 1,000 things on that. But the administrative burden that will be released, I think, from AI does create opportunity to put more investment in time in learning and development, in product and development cycles as well. So it's going to remove a lot of the administration so you can focus, I think, on some of those,
Good point. When you mentioned about cross-functional and the admin tasks, I mean, as salespeople, that's a challenge. I think a lot of sales leaders and businesses will tell you is about how much admin should salespeople do, because that's what we hate about. And having AI help support and how businesses can embed AI to reduce that admin weight is just going to make wonders.
It's going to be huge. Your stronger relationships across teams is going to be more possible, and focusing on the learning and development of relationship selling versus just being really great at product knowledge. I think that's going to be a great win and an outcome from the use of AI.
You touched upon a very good point earlier of how salespeople are scaled up into leadership roles, and that just reminded me of my own journey. So in sales, as you would see, we don't really have a lot of formal education like bachelor's or master's, and especially even if the university kids, you would ask them what you want to do. Rarely you'll find someone saying, hey, I'm going to do a bachelor's in sales and jump straight into a sales role. People who actually are in sales role is because of the passion. They love customer conversation. And over a period of time, they learn through the leaders or training or whatnot, and they become star performers. And those are the ones typically jump into sales roles. But sales leadership is different than an individual performance, right? So where do you think anyone who moves from sales performer to a sales leader, because they got to work, once you move into leadership, you've got to work across those cross functions, your finance, operations and whatnot. What would you guide such a young sales leader?
If those formal avenues and cross-functional systems aren't already in a business, then you can create those yourselves, right? I'll give an example. When I was really, really, really early on in my career, I was project manager in delivery team, right? I started at a new business, and my team already had their routines. They would go out for lunch, they had their own cliques and things, the way things were working. And I just happened to be invited by the sales team to go for lunch. And through there, I got such a vast understanding of, these guys are working towards, going after this new target market. I didn't even know that. It's really helpful for them to know that we did this in delivery. So this case study is very pertinent for them to be able to. So that is where an informal, cross-functional conversation was happening. And I think we've all been there where people know they have those relationships that build naturally, and it's like, Ben in finance is really good friends with, Jessica, and so we better ask, Jessica to ask that question and get that date pushed
the water
back
cooler
because of the water
conversations.
cooler conversations. And I spoke about this recently, but how do you create those informal moments, informal, structures, which is creating a space for curiosity and respect. And so I think for a new sales leader is to first, does that exist in my business? But if not, how can I be part of the solution in creating that? And so creating a meeting, which isn't a meeting, where an update meeting, and let's talk about targets, but finding out about the other roles in the business and highlighting if there's a misalignment between what you're working towards. I think they can do that themselves, in an organic way if it's not formally there.
Oh, that's an incredible point that you made, because normally we are talking about deliveries and expectations from the others, right? So as salespeople, when you've got a delivery to be done to a customer or meeting customer expectations, I think it's incredible to understand other person's side of world and how they see things. I think it also touched upon a very important point of alignment, because the way as salespeople, because we are externally focused and that's what we are seeing, we are bringing in those insights into the business and putting those expectations onto the product team. And through my experience, or what I generally see as well, we have those very interesting conversations with customers. And customers keep asking about product updates and give us this and give us that. And so we bring in a whole new insights internally. Okay, so that's customer feedback, insights of the competition, review of how good our product is, what are the new features we should add, and what we look forward is what are the new updates that are going to do to our product, a service, what is the interesting bit that I can take.
Yeah, let us do these things.
Exactly, like I'm going to have a customer meeting, give me something new.
Yeah, and then maybe the product team is like, well, we've just been told that we need to scale this part of the product to X by this date, and that's actually misaligned. So, I think, and on the other side, product might be like, oh, we don't know the conversations they're having in that way. So if that was already organically happening, right? Yeah. Or you've got the structure in to make those conversations happen, all of a sudden it's not like product said no, sales, here they go again.
Loggerheads and the fight.
You have a joint understanding. It's so important to move. And again, if I mentioned this earlier on, but outcomes. If everyone's clear and aligned on the outcomes, then it removes that friction quite quickly. But I was thinking something that you just said about the non-formal training for sales in general. And I want to give an example of something that was uncovered in a business, or a larger business that I was working at. So brought in to work on the strategy with the senior leaders. And so we've got the head of, customer success and customer service, and the head of sales and the other team members there, and they're focused on revenue and some market expansion, and obviously customer success they're focusing on tech support and client resolution times, and making sure and product is focusing on making sure that everything's working, doing those updates, etc. And through conversations that they'd never had before, they realised that the customer success and technical support team were having the most customer touch points in the entire organisation. And however, some of those teams also had the most sort of negative view of the organisation, because they're sometimes getting those customer challenges, or this isn't working, or this is a challenge. They're not seeing the product in its full capacity. They're not seeing what the sales team is saying.
And most of the time, when you're having those customer conversation, instead of hearing the good positive things, you're listening customer problems. So that's right on top of your head. That adds to it.
And it was a huge opportunity for that team to upsell as well. But obviously they're not in a place, if they're already in that negative mindset, their last thing that they want to do is sort of upsell. So there was a huge revenue opportunity and leakage from the customer success and tech support. Now, tech supports are going to be replaced mostly with agents and AI, but we can, so whether that's another conversation. But back then, that human layer, they are so well positioned to create future sales. But when there even is like the services that you provide for sales teams, do you also provide those services for the operational delivery and customer teams? Because everyone can learn about relationship and growth and some of those skills without necessarily being an outbound sales hunter, if you will. Yeah. So if you had to provide that for, cross-functionally, I think sales training is important.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Interestingly, just yesterday I was having a conversation with my client. And as part of the sales training, the client said to me that, Dipti, can we include some other members of the business? They are not the sales or customer centric. And I said, absolutely yes. Because sales is not the responsibility just of the salespeople, though they have a target to meet. But I think everyone in the business has a sales. You have a sales target, subtly, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
Because there are so many touch points, like you said. Exactly. Like in this particular client that I was talking to, they do delivery of courses to their customers. So there are facilitators, there are the delivery teams who are in constant touch. So there is a whole opportunity at those customer touch points And it's not about that you have to go make a sale and win a sale and have a target. I think if you just remove that pressure aside and just look at the conversation side of things, that's a huge opportunity to tap into. So amazing point, Amanda.
Exactly, and you don't even have to call it sales if it.
That's the thing.
Because that can also be like, oh, I'm not a seller, I'm not sales. But you are still solving. You're all in the game of wanting to help the customer and solving that problem, and so it can even still be an element of customer service. But you're just able to start thinking about asking those questions and how can I further solve their problem, which might result in you purchasing this or that. So they really, if they were going to continue operating that way, there was just a huge missed opportunity. Plus, there was also a bit of a culture problem there around the tech support's, perspective of the products in the organisation and the sales team. I was thinking about another thing, but as well in terms of what causes sometimes the sales versus delivery, the incentives around, they see the sales teams going on trips and things like that. So I think
the perks
and things like that. But also, I do a lot of work with businesses around that employee engagement strategy of how, you can reward the delivery teams.
Okay, now on this, I have another burning question because I've just had another conversation with a client this week. And interestingly, there are businesses where, especially if you're transitioning from a founder-led onto, scaling up and growing. So you've started off with the founder-led sales. Eventually you have a team, and then sales being responsibility of this particular person and that particular person not having a robust sales function. So when it comes to somebody else who has some level of, ownership and contribution, but they don't feel comfortable about it when it's why you have an opportunity but you're not comfortable about driving sales conversation. And I think what you really pinpointed is to shift words, not to use things like sales. Remove the word sales. I think it just brings fear to people. What would be some thoughts about that? Like, if we have other businesses and those touch points who can generate sales, who can bring in those opportunities within the business, these touch points, what would be some areas that they could think of, or what changes can we do in sales conversations that can, help them open those opportunities?
You mean the other people in the company that,
like the operations or delivery team who's not really a customer facing but has that delivery job, so they're still interacting with the customer, but they still have that opportunity right in front of them, but they are just thinking about it delivery. They're just thinking about delivery, but there could be a whole lot of opportunity to cross-sell and upsell, right? So how does this person come out of not having the fear of sales, but just driving those opportunities and bringing those opportunities in?
Yeah, I think it's relationships. So if it's centered around the customer relationship versus we now need to sell to this customer, and if they're in delivery, they're normally, responsible for a number of things that you want to make sure that the customer's satisfied, right? So I think it comes down to the question. It's it's the diagnostic. So the same diagnostic of the customer originally to the diagnostic that I'm talking about internally of the C-suite to a delivery person, still further, diagnosing that client and asking questions and building a relationship. So you can focus on, we really want you to have, good relationships with our clients. We want to understand their problems, and through that, maybe they're not making the direct ask for the upsell, but they have the information to then pass on to the sales team if there is someone that is stronger in having those, because some people don't want to be customer facing, prefer to be you don't want to bring in those
qualification question that not by, so you identify an opportunity and you bring that conversation to a specialist and then leave it to the salesperson to then go through the process.
Within change management, we talk about champions and the role of a champion of business in a type of change or with strategy execution rollout. I think the role of a champion can be very valuable for that cross-functional, conversations that we're talking about. And by champion, I don't mean a leader or a manager. It can be people at multiple levels that are gathering that type of feedback and then bringing that back to the leaders to say, how can we do better? Where is there an opportunity with this delivery team to, for us to upsell or even, put them on a different plan or whatever that is. So I think it's sort of an unspoken and again, sometimes informal role because someone might be doing that naturally, but you can formalise the role of champions within a business to create those feedback loops within different departments that can then inform decision making that is aligned across all leaders.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think from I'm just picking and just thinking, what could be an action item for a salesperson in this? Okay, so maybe have regular meetings with the delivery team to check upon how is the progress of the delivery, or also having an opportunity where anyone who's got those customer opportunities can feed into the business and funnel them through.
Yeah.
And do you think an incentive structure for anyone who gets opportunities is a good idea?
Yeah, we could go deep into incentive structures.
I think it's what sales have always got the incentives.
Exactly. And they're always typically tied to sales more than delivery. I think, yes, of course, there's ways to recognise people and they can look really differently in different organisations. You have to be really careful sometimes when or monetary incentive is tied to a particular deliverable or KPI, for example, because it can skew someone's focus to I'm just going to focus on this because this means that I'm going to get my incentive or bonus. So it's a tricky area to navigate and it needs to be thoughtful. So yes and no is my answer to that. But I think, of course, there's ways to recognise people or to get them and what motivates people as well. So you have to understand that someone in customer care or delivery or product might not have the same motivations as people in the sales team. So it's a bigger conversation, a bigger piece around, as I said, that employee, people and culture strategy of how to reward your teams. But it's a good point because I think that's what I was saying. In isolation, you look, sales team get these incentives, what do we do? So it does need to be looked at of how you're promoting and encouraging, those client conversations, encouraging growth mindset within the business, but you just need to make sure that it doesn't become, it can become toxic and working against
not just
your
a cash
strategy.
cow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think interestingly as salespeople, while we want to get our targets done, we're conscious about how can I make money and win my targets, but make a lot of incentives. Anyway, now I've got another interesting question as we're coming towards the end of our podcast. And I can go on forever. But Amanda, with Focus Solutions, last time when I had the opportunity to be part of your workshop, and trust me guys, this was incredible. The way Amanda takes you through the process of confusion, driving you to clarity, amazing. I will highly recommend that. Okay, now I'm not selling, but I'm just sharing my experience. What I really enjoyed out there was you had some of your clients share their experiences and they actually talked about how you would help them take them through where they had all those different challenges and how you had helped them build some right processes and structure, all funneling through to bringing more clarity. Any interesting customer stories and stuff of how do you take your clients through, like what sort of challenges you see in the business and what you've done to help them achieve that clarity?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time I work with really capable and talented leaders. And you said it at the very beginning of the podcast, quite often it's not the strategy that's the problem, it's the actual execution of it. And, and how you operationalize that in different environments. Sometimes you're dealing with subject matter experts that are heads of the department, right? And so they're very great, very extremely good at what they do in their field, and so they know how to deliver. Do they execute the commercial aspects of of the strategy as well, in terms of how we're going to grow and maybe do things, in a different way to hit the commercial goals versus just deliver. So I do a lot of work with that, and some of the examples you saw. First of all, creating clarity amongst the C-suite, all the founders and the directors, if it's a smaller business, clarity and alignment. Without that at the top, it is going to always break.
Oh, yeah.
The other
Big
thing
problem
that I did with this one particular client, they were going too quickly. You have multiple departments. Yes, you want to roll out your plan. In 3 months, they tried to do this, but they really only had one implementer. So I'll come back to the champion role as well on that. So C-suite's aligned, great. Strategy's good, great. We're rolling it out. We've got one key person to do that. But, we're a 250 person organisation. One person cannot do that alone and have the influence to get the managers on board with the way of doing that. So that is where the role of champions is created, or a phased approach to rolling out strategy is what I did in this case. So we just start with one department, right?
Yeah.
And let's see how they adopt this new way, which is really looking at also the systems and tooling of a business, and how are you creating those feedback loops, the cadence, so you're not adding meeting on meeting on meeting, but you're working towards alignment and being able to see how strategy shows up in the day-to-day work of people. So yeah, that was a recent one that comes to mind, where you can't fall on one person's shoulders to do that in that size business. You need a strategic, almost change management and culture transformation plan alongside that. And so we were able to do that. And then they started to see those, revenue growth results, after phase one, when, roll it out in the other departments, and those cross-functional feedback loops are in place. The champions are funneling back with course crew. It's not about being rigid. So obviously, like I'm your sales, I'm ops, but we're both strategic and growth minded, right? So so often people think you're putting in a framework and it's rigid. No, that's not that, because we're human. We need it to be agile and we need it to be able to adapt. So that's what I do on a day in, day out, trying to bridge that gap really between what shows up on what I say strategy not to die on a piece of paper or in a slide deck, and show up and people feel connected to it.
Yeah, because it's if there is no people element and the flexibility, agility in that, I think then it becomes very hard with the execution.
Exactly.
And as you said, it's not about a strategy problem, it's the execution problem. And that's what you saw. Amazing.
Awesome.
Well, I think we can go on for another few hours, Amanda, because as we're still talking, I still have burning another 10 questions, but I think I'll have to schedule you for another podcast.
Perfect. We'll do a follow-up, a part 1, part 2.
Yeah, because strategy, ops, execution, whatnot. There's always burning questions. Thank you so much for your incredible time and some great insights that you've shared with us today. And of course, I'm going to be sharing your contact details to all our listeners. We will be posting about Amanda. But quickly, if anyone has to connect with you as a business, if they're seeking clarity or if they have to reach out, how can they contact you?
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Obviously, my website is focussolutions.co. That's co, not com. And you can get me. All my details are on LinkedIn. So DM me, and I'm always happy to hear about anyone's challenges or frustrations within business. I love businesses from all shapes and sizes, as I say. So always open for a chat, no matter what the challenge is.
Yep, I can vouch for that. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dipti. Thanks everyone.
All right, see you
Bye.
then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.